All right, so as we're entering into this section here and really kind of closing out the section about all the things that we should add to our faith with, I want to do a quick little review. What were the reasons? See if this is working here. There we go. So he says in verse 5, also for this very reason, giving all diligence, we are to add to our faith. So what are the reasons that we are supposed to be diligent to add to our faith? So there's first couple of verses there, 2 Peter chapter 1 kind of talk about it, but this is kind of the basis for the foundation upon why we should add to our faith. We talked about this probably a couple months ago, but just wanted to do a quick review. Cindy, is that your hand up, or are you just okay?
Well, just I have laid aside all malice, all guile, all hypocrisies, envies, and all evil speakings.
Okay.
That's the first part. All those things are supposed to put away.
Are you in 2 Peter or 1 Peter?
I'm in first. Am I supposed to be in second?
We're in 2 Peter, I'm sorry.
Well, you shouldn't have called on me so fast.
Okay. 2 Peter chapter 1 and verse 5, he says, also for this very reason, giving all diligence, we're to add to our faith. And so I'm kind of want to refresh what are these reasons that we are to add to our faith. Kate.
Partake of the divine nature.
Okay, so you can be partakers of the divine nature. So the last part of verse 4 there. And actually, Peter gives us a lot of reasons. Anybody else? Okay, Cheryl?
Goodness, knowledge, self-control, perseverance, godliness, mutual affection, and love.
Okay, and that's what we are to add to our faith. Very good, which was my next question, but that's okay. We have somebody that's forward thinking, which is good. All right, any other reasons why we should be diligent to add to our faith? Okay, Liz?
He's given us exceedingly great and precious promises.
Okay, exceedingly great and precious promises. Very good. So let's just put that whole verse, or that first section up there. There we go. All right, I just put all the verses up there so you could kind of see them. But yeah, we can be partakers, Kate said, we can be partakers of the divine nature. His divine power is given to us all things that pertain to, or all things to life and godliness, through the knowledge of him who called us by glory and virtue. And we're going to talk a little bit about that calling. It's one of our questions tonight. How does God call us? How does God elect us? So we'll have a little bit of discussion about that. But this whole letter was written to those who have like precious faith through the righteousness of God. It's God's righteousness. And grace and peace can be multiplied in the knowledge of God who called us. So, but really, these are exceedingly great and precious promises, and so that is that very reason why we are to give all diligence to add to our faith. And Cheryl already answered our next question, so we're going to go to that one. What are we to add to our faith? And she already went through all those. So this is the next couple of verses. And these are all the different lessons that we've gone through over the last couple of months. But we're to build, add to your faith, build on your faith because of those exceedingly great and precious promises that we could be partakers of the divine nature. And so really this lesson tonight kind of ties all this up, and he looks at those next couple of verses and kind of unpacks it and helps us to understand the huge benefits of being diligent to add to our faith. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Any questions or comments? All right. I'm already behind on my pages here. So, and as always, I'd encourage you to work on remembering these as you work on committing Scripture to memory. It's always a good thing to have in mind. So the first part, and what I'm going to do is just kind of go through basically the 5 different benefits that are given to us And as you look at verses 8 through 11, some of them are more like warnings or negatives, but if you look at them as, hey, if I'm adding these things to my faith, then it can be a benefit. So we're going to kind of look at them both ways there. So the first one that we want to talk about is what we kind of started with tonight, is giving all diligence. And the first question really was, what is diligence? Or to define what diligence is, what does diligence mean?
Concentrated effort,
Concentrated effort, okay.
careful persistence.
Careful and consistent
Persistence.
and persistence, okay. Anyone else wants to chime in at all? Okay. So the author kind of pointed out, I think he pointed out a couple things. Diligence, as defined by Thayer, was to give every effort. And he mentioned the Greek word spode. I don't know what the correct Greek pronunciation of that is. But to hasten, to put forth an energetic effort, earnestness in accomplishing, promoting, or striving after anything. And so this requires effort. It requires all of those attributes that we are to add to our faith. It requires self-control and perseverance. It requires brotherly kindness and love.
We mustn't overlook the word energetic.
Energetic, with energy. Okay, good.
Well, excitement.
Yeah,
I believe enthusiasm is contagious.
it is. So Fluffy says enthusiasm is contagious, and I think you can see that in the Lord's work and in his ministry. He was very zealous with a lot of energy. So, yeah, good point. And so as we go and kind of unpack these different blessings that we can see, that helps us to kind of understand why we should bother to grow and to mature spiritually. Kent, the church over in Kent, just I think a week or so ago had a lesson of what's in it for me, and it was pretty interesting. I got to go to a couple of those, and then just this coming week we have the all-in kind of idea. So I'm kind of seeing a common theme here in this area. And so let's look at these different blessings, these 5 different blessings, and really look at the positive side as an encouragement. So the first one we're going to look at is in verse 8 of 2 Peter chapter 1. 2 Peter chapter 1. Just and that is being fruitful. And I'll go ahead and put that verse up there. So it says, if these things are yours and abound, you will be neither barren nor unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. And so the second question is, what 2 conditions are discussed, or what 2 conditions must be met in order to obtain these results or blessings? Mike?
The New American Standard says, are yours and are increasing.
Okay.
Abound kind of gives, sometimes when I look at that, I'm going, well, I don't know that I'm ever going to abound in some of these things. But if I can have some and keep increasing, keep moving forward, growing in my faith, or in these fruits, then we will be
Okay, so you are New American Standard?
New American.
Okay. Do we have a New International Version? Somebody can read verse 8.
Mine says, if you possess these qualities in increasing measure.
Okay, possess these qualities in increasing measure. Kind of the same idea that Mike had. I think the English Standard also has in abundance and increasing, or something like that.
If these qualities are yours and are increasing.
Are yours and increasing. So really and the author makes a point here that the qualities, we have to already have these. You have to have the qualities, not intend to have the qualities. Or I'm going to, next year I hope to have these qualities. The idea is that we have them. But the other thing that we can take from this is, and the author points this out, is we don't plateau. We don't ever get to a point where I've arrived. I've arrived, and I think Dan sometimes mentioned, if you're wearing your overalls, you kind of rest on your laurels, something like that. Roger?
Yeah, and it also means that you have to put an effort into doing this.
Okay.
If you read it and turn away from it, if you haven't done anything, you have to strive to apply whatever it is you know, and that means then you begin to increase your knowledge, and all the rest that comes with your service to God begins to increase because you find out these are the things that I need to be doing.
Okay. So it's not something that we get to this level and then we can coast the rest of the way, just coast our way in, kind of a thing. So the author mentions kind of the opposite of this is, but the unfruitful that's mentioned in here is arapos, not yielding what it ought to yield, and that was from Thayer, and so that the opposite of that is we will be useful and fruitful as opposed to being barren and unfruitful. Any questions on that? Questions, comments? Yeah.
Doesn't it talk, doing that, if it keeps you from being ineffective and unfruitful, you become an individual that know how to speak to people, and you can help others, find their walk with God, so to speak. And it's a lifelong thing for all of us. There's no downhill, like you said, no coasting.
Yep.
Every day.
Okay. Dan?
I just wanted to make sure we understand, increasing just means that. I mean, it doesn't have to be, I know he says something about superabounding, which, that could be the end result, but if we just add a little bit all the time, then you're fulfilling that requirement. We have in our possession, and I'm growing in them. And it's not like we have a growth spurt and then we quit growing, or that we have to have these huge leaps of growth every time we turn around. It's just that we're constantly increasing.
And it's steady.
Yeah.
Randy?
Yeah.
So it says these things are yours and abound. What is abound talking about there? What does that mean? Does it mean that we have full control of them, or they're part of our everyday lives, or they're just there for us to learn? What's the take on that?
Abounding?
Abound, the way it's written right there. Yours.
That's New King James Version. Yeah. So
Okay,
it's
King James Version. I just want to know what that means. Are yours and abound. These things are yours, and they abound.
It means they're seen in your life and they're used in your life, and yeah.
Okay.
Big. They're big in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not just sitting there. They're there to be used, and like Dan said, you need to add to them as much as you can through your normal life. Just, don't let them lay there until we're going to have a class on it, and that's, oh yeah, I got to have that.
Great point. Thank you. Okay.
The Greek word there, that's translated abound, is where mine is translated increasing.
Increasing, yeah.
And it's pleonazo, and the definition is to superabound or to make to abound, but the usage is, I have more than enough. And so the idea is, I have a good amount here, and if I have a lot of faith, then I can start sharing it with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm increasing in that. And Otto's right, it's not for, that you get a degree. I have my PhD in the Christian graces, and it's just all academic. No, it has to be practical, it has to be used, it has to be usable. But the idea is that we're continuing to grow, and as we grow, we use it more.
Yep. So I think the opposite of this is going into our next question, and if you want to keep your marker there in 2 Peter, we're going to go back and look at John 15, and Dan just gave a sermon on this. I think it was last Sunday, out of John 15. But we'll just go over there at John 15 and look at that real quick, and then we'll continue on. And the question is, what's the result of of a Christian who is not bearing fruit?
He's cut off,
Okay?
and there's more, but he's cut off, thrown
Okay.
away, withered, and thrown into the fire.
Yeah. Cut off. And I think that's from verse 2. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away or cuts off.
Right.
And every that bears fruit, he prunes that it may bear more fruit. And that was kind of more what Dan was talking about last Sunday. But then down in verse 6, if anyone does not abide in me, he is cast out as a branch and is withered, and they gather them and throw them into the fire, and they are burned. And so the point there Jesus makes is in verse 7, to abide in him and his words, and that so we can glorify the Father in verse 8 and bear much fruit, so that we can be his disciples. And so that's kind of the carrying on what Peter talks about here in 2 Peter, that if we possess these qualities in increasing measure or are ours and abound, not something that we have as an intention, then we will be fruitful. We will not be barren or unfruitful. So,
And
yeah.
the New American Standard is like, if you don't have these qualities, you will be useless and non-productive. You're just useless.
Useless and
It was useless and nor unproductive.
useless and unproductive.
You don't possess those. So instead of barren and unfruitful, you can be useless and non-productive, unproductive. Like pretty to the point.
Yeah, and I don't think that's what we want to be. So, okay, good. Let's go ahead on to, Mike, you got a comment?
Just that fire that you're talking about, that's a future thing, right? That's at the end of when we either leave this life or you.
That's my understanding.
I don't see God burning any of us right now.
No.
Just suddenly say, that's it, I'll give it up for a while.
Yeah, I think
Be patient with us.
that happened to Nadab and Abihu with the profane fire in Leviticus 10. So-
It's not anything we want to test, but
No.
I don't want people to wander around in fear, going, well, I don't have enough faith, maybe God's going to burn me today. You know?
Right.
I just seem to see that sometimes, of people living in fear that God is waiting to strike them with fire from above because they didn't do enough of whatever these things are.
Right. Okay. So we're going to go on to verse 9 now. And I think Mike will appreciate this part here. Clear vision. So 2 Peter back in 2 Peter chapter 1 and verse 9. For he who lacks these things is short-sighted even to blindness, and has forgotten that he was cleansed from his old sins. And so the opposite of this is that we abound, and we're able to look farther down the road than just what's happening right here in front of us. We have vision, and we know the way, and we see this. We're very familiar with this passage. We were just in John chapter 15. If you go back a chapter in John chapter 14, Jesus opens with, "Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be. And where I go, you know, and the way you know." Thomas said to him, "Lord, we do not know where you are going. How can we know the way?" And Jesus said to him, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." And so if these things are ours in increasing measure, then we will not be short-sighted. We will be far-sighted, being able to look down the road and have clear vision. And so I think that's a pretty positive thing that we can look forward to, and I think it's an encouraging thing for us to think about. And again, like I mentioned as we opened the study, this is kind of mentioned as a warning or as a negative, but we can actually look at it as a positive. So the fourth question is, and it's kind of related to this whole vision, is why did Peter walk on the water? and then what caused Peter to sink. And we're looking at this in Matthew chapter 14, if you want to go back there and look at that real quick. Matthew chapter 14.
He took his eyes off of Jesus.
Took his eyes off of Jesus. Okay. Yeah, so it's down around verse 25 where Jesus was walking on the sea, and they were troubled. They thought it was a ghost. And Jesus says to them in verse 27, "Be of good cheer, it's I, don't be afraid." And then Peter says, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." So he said, "Come." And when Peter come down out of the water, he walked on the water. Or when he came down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. I don't know how long he was waltzing along on the water, but it says that he was walking, Peter walked on the water. And then Fluffy said he took his eyes off of Jesus, and what did he look at? He looked at the waves of the storm, and he forgot about the Lord standing before him, and he began to sink and cried out for the Lord to save him.
I think it's interesting, it says he began to sing.
Right,
When you sing, you sing. I mean,
right.
it's hard for me to understand.
Well, you can't walk on the water either, Fluffy, so.
How do you know?
I'm virtually sure that you
Yeah.
No, and I think it was just a matter of, he got some warning that he wasn't looking at, and he may have been able to look back and step back up, but he kept looking at the waves,
Yeah.
he kept going down. It was a process, just like walking in the water was a process.
Yeah.
Well, it was like a matter of faith to begin with.
Yeah.
God called me and I'll walk to you. And so we started out and he was doing it.
Right.
Then, it's just like with us, things of the world around us and we start to sink.
Yeah.
We take our eyes off of him.
Yeah. So he did. He took his eyes off the Lord. He took his eyes off of what he was focused on and allowed the other things around him to sway his faith and to change his faith. Yeah. Cindy.
Oh, sorry. The point too was that he was afraid. Fear took over. Also, that's a strong
Okay.
element, in the human life, I think, is fear.
So Cindy points out that Peter became afraid. How many times have we seen in the Old Testament and in the New Testament that we're told to not be afraid? And you're right, because that's a common reaction when we're faced with something like that or a situation, is fear. Okay, Josh.
I think it's also a really good reminder, and I think what we're studying, that if you grow, the faith very much so is something that can be fluid. Like Peter didn't immediately sink all the way down to the bottom of the ocean. His faith wavered a little bit. He didn't have no faith, but it was enough that it was really starting to affect his ability to follow Jesus and see Jesus.
Yeah. That's a great point. And I mean, this is the same Peter that in Matthew the 16th chapter, when Jesus says, "I'm going to go to Jerusalem and I'm going to be mistreated and I'm going to be crucified." And Peter says, "Not so, Lord, should never happen to you." And Jesus says to him, "Get behind me, Satan." So that's the same Peter that said that. But yeah, and Jesus tells him that Satan asked for him to sift him like wheat. But when you have returned, strengthen your brethren. Jesus prays for him. Yeah. Otto, do you have a comment?
Just a comment. This really shows us we are so easily distracted when we're dealing with the Word and trying to serve Him that little things get in our way, and before we know it, we're sinking.
Yeah.
It's just a great verse.
It is, and it's a great, I mean, it's an amazing miracle. I mean, that Peter even was walking on the water, if you think about it. Here they are in a storm, tossing around, and Dan's mentioned this before. I don't know what it was like around Jesus. Like, was it like a calm, did he have like a a 20-foot radius around him that was all calm, and then everywhere else was, we have no idea what it looked like. But then Peter gets out and walk. I mean, it's amazing, but it's such a great lesson that with storms around you, if you keep your eyes on the Lord, that's going to direct your path. That's going to strengthen your path.
I
So,
just thought that if it was me, and of course it wasn't, never will be, but I would be so amazed that I'm walking on water when I'm looking at the Lord. I wouldn't have time to think about it.
yeah. It's probably like one of those things that you think you're going to try to ask the Lord about let's go talk to Peter and see what it was like for that 1 minute when he, I don't think that's going to happen, but anyway.
In Mississippi, we had a neighbor who had been in the Japanese prison during the Second World War. And he said the ones who didn't make it had lost faith. He said, I always knew we'd be rescued. I didn't know when, but I had faith that we would be rescued. And the ones who let that slip aside did not make it.
So their faith helped them through that situation. Yeah. It's amazing. Okay. Yeah.
We're talking about adding to our knowledge and so on and so forth. And there's a good reason for doing that is so that we'll be able to handle the word rightly. And in 2 Peter 3, beginning in verse 16, or talks about Peter wrote things that some of them were hard to understand.
Paul?
Which the ignorant and the unstable twist of their own destruction as they do other sources. So the more knowledge that you can attain and use, the better it is to understand things that are hard, instead of just thinking, well, I really don't know what it is, but I'm going to say this. And you begin to twist truth. And it's very obvious that what we see in this world today and how many different religions and thoughts and stuff there are is because they failed to go to the right source of knowledge and understanding and just begin to make up their own truth. So we got to be careful we don't find ourselves twisting these hard things like Peter says, so that we can figure them out. And that's what we do studying here together today, helping one another figure that out.
Okay. So as we're kind of thinking about this, of having clear vision and not being short-sighted, not being blind, and thinking about Peter taking his eyes off of the Lord, what should we focus on? I think this is question 5. What are the things that we should focus on and be looking towards? Okay, I heard things above. Yeah, so from Colossians chapter 3 and verse 2, set your mind on things above and not on things on this earth. Okay.
What things are you talking about?
Say again?
I've said that one a number of times. It set me in mind, keep your mind on things above. What things are we talking about? Of God, Jesus, or what?
Okay. Philippians, the 4th chapter, he tells us whatever things are pure, whatever things are of good report, these are the things that we are to meditate on. I'm kind of paraphrasing a little bit.
Verse 8, finally, brethren, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good repute, if there is any excellence and if anything worthy of praise, dwell on these things. And so when I think of those, that's the kind of thing, not just stop looking up and say, no, God is up there. So we keep, these are the things about God, his characteristics and who he is, and we can keep our mind on those kinds of things and not get bogged down in these other things. That's what will help us.
Okay. So another passage that I think the author mentions is 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and verses 16 through 18. It says, therefore we do not lose heart, even though our outward man is perishing, yet the inward man is being renewed day by day. And Paul says his light affliction, with I think 2 Corinthians 11 has his resume of light affliction. Paul says his light affliction, which is but for a moment, is working for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. While we do not look at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporary, but the things which are not seen are eternal. So good question, Mike. What things are we to focus on, and how do we apply this? How do we apply this in our lives? So we have some of you are going to have diapers to change, and meals to make, and you have home repairs to make, you have homework to do. Or how do we apply this in our home or in the neighborhood or on the job when we have these other scriptures that tell us, even the same one, Colossians 3:2, tells us to set our minds on things above. And then just a couple of verses later, he says, verse 22, servants, obey in all things your masters according to the flesh, not with eye service, but not as men pleasers, but in sincerity of heart, fearing God. And whatever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord. So how am I setting my mind on things above when I'm on the job or in the neighborhood?
Same thing, you spend time, have to focus on the Lord.
Okay. Still keep your focus on the Lord. Still remember whose child I am, whose name I wear. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just you're looking through a different set of glasses. So you're not focusing on the world and the things of the world and how can I get rich, how can I get this or that or advance myself in some way. You're wanting to bring glory to God. So what kind of parent am I going to be? What kind of employee am I going to be? What kind of neighbor am I going to be that's going to, because my mind is set on things above and glorifying God, which is above, then everything that I do is going to go through that filter so that God is glorified by whatever I do in this world. I'm not focusing on this thing except the fact that how can this bring glory to God?
Right. Yeah. So it doesn't matter what we're doing,
Right.
as long as we're seeking to glorify God in whatever it is that we're doing, and that can be as an employee or an employer, husband, wife, son, daughter, whatever the relationship is. We can see the Lord's hand and have our focus in all that we do. Yeah, Kate?
I think it's also focusing on this, like in verse 3 where it says, His divine power has given us everything we need for a godly life. That the important thing for us here is that we are making the effort and staying rooted in that vine, and God provides the increase and provides the growth, and the fruit of the Spirit is all those things that we want in our lives. And then by focusing on that God is producing those things in us, and that we're just making the effort and the diligence toward that it doesn't have to come from ourselves, then we have freedom there that God will provide that without us having to strive after all of those individual things, as I need to be more loving and I need to be more peaceful, but by making the effort toward knowing God and being diligent toward His truth and His word, that He'll provide the increase there, and it doesn't have to come from us.
Yeah, and recognize, that's a great point, recognizing that any increase is going to come from God. I mean, if you think about it, God gives us the ability to be employed and to do whatever trade or whatever we're doing. God is the one that provides that for us and opens those doors for us. And so in whatever capacity that we're in, we have to serve the Lord in whatever capacity that we're in. So thanks for asking that question, Mike. I actually had this in there of wanting to kind of take a step back and think about that a little bit.
Well, I think you made a really good point there, Randy, too, is that we're not in this by ourselves. You know, if these things are in you and increase, then what that's going to make you, if you look at that positively, it's going to make you have 20/20 vision, and you won't forget that you've been cleansed from your past sins. But how does that happen? Well, because God's pruning us. And so he's got his hand in our lives. If we're thinking on things above, that we're going to go through those times so that we'll be fruitful and be increasing and be abounding. It doesn't just happen on our own effort. We have a part in that, but most of it is just we need to be willing to let God work in our lives and do our part and let him do his part so that we can, because he can do more in us than we can even imagine.
Yep.
So and then your vision will be even sharper than you thought. And it's just, it's an amazing thing that God is involved and is the husbandman, the vineyard keeper in our lives and helping us do that.
Yep. And I guess the other piece of that is having to recognize, okay, this is a little nudge, a little prune here, and being able to get redirected back into the direction that we would like to go. Okay, so the third one, which is really kind of out of that same verse, is good memory. And again, it's still 2 Peter chapter 1 and verse 9. And Dan just mentioned this. So if we have these in an increasing measure, then we are not going to forget that we were cleansed from our old sins. And so one of the questions that the author asks is from Joshua chapter 4. And let's go ahead and go back there and take a look at that. Joshua chapter 4 and about first 7 verses there. And so the question is, what memorial did Joshua set up, and what was the purpose, or why did Joshua set this memorial up? Yeah, Roger?
So that the people would have a way to teach their children when they ask, what are these stones for?
Okay.
And they could teach them the story, and this is the spot that the Lord led us over the Jordan, through the Jordan, to come here. So it was a memorial that they could teach their children.
Okay. And where were the stones supposed to come from?
Out of the midst of the Jordan.
From the midst of the Jordan?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so I think that's verse 3.
Yes.
He says to take 12 stones from here, out of the midst, from the Jordan, from the place where the priest's feet stood firm. So I'm assuming this is right out of the middle of where the river flows. They're supposed to grab a big stone, one for each of the tribes. And then like Roger said, that the reason is for when the children ask in time to come, this is verse 6, that this may be a sign among you when your children ask in time to come, what do these stones mean to you? And then this is where the children of Israel and the ark crossed over the Jordan. And it's a memorial, like Roger said. So what's the purpose of the memorial?
Remembrance.
I think Luca talked about this at the Lord's Supper last week. So, yeah, it's an opportunity. It's time set aside to remember what somebody did in their life, and that's what we have memorials for. I think I would even suggest tombstones are kind of like memorials to whoever that person is. A lot of times they have a little inscription there about that person. So yeah, it's an opportunity to remember what happened, and in this case, what the Lord did for Israel when they crossed over the River Jordan. Yeah, Dan?
And this wasn't a memorial that they crossed over the Jordan on dry ground. This is a memorial that God brought them into the promised land like he had promised Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and everybody else along. This is huge. It's not just a miracle, just not to remember a miracle that we crossed over. This is a miracle that God, over the last 300 years, kept his promise, and now we are in the promised land, just like he said. And these stones came right out of there because when we crossed, God made it an easy path for us. And this is a memorial that he did what he said he would do.
Right. And that's a great point, that what God does promise does come to pass.
Right.
So yeah. Somebody else said something? Okay. Let's see how we're doing here.
You're out of time.
Okay.
According to there's nobody to flash the lights, but that's
Okay, ding
you do
ding.
what you want. I mean, I'm not going to tell you to have to stop, but I'm just saying the clock says it's over.
All right. Well, I think that's pretty good. We got the first 6 questions done. I think there's 6 remaining, so we'll try to knock those out next. Well, it won't be next Sunday night. It will be
2 weeks.
2 weeks from tonight. So, because Don Truex will be on his 3rd lesson at this point on Are You All In? So yeah, so we will pick up with question 7, which is about what happens if we don't remember. So thank you for all your comments and participation tonight.